Fala galera, today I'm going to make the deck profile from the WCQ in South America in Chile, where I got the top 32, and also it's pretty similar to the list that I use in Knoxville, which I top 16, so it's kind of combine of both. The main deck is only one card, I think one card difference, and some cards in the side deck too. And I would like to do pretty much the same way that I did the Sky Striker profile from before, where I explained a lot of things and the reasoning for cards and etc. And yeah, like in this tournament in the WCQ, I kind of went undefeated because I had two draws in Swiss, and I lost in a really unfortunate way in top cut due to time rule. Yeah, and yeah, I'm really happy with the deck, and I think it's really strong. In my opinion, Salamangreat is not very well represented. Like many of the good players don't even consider Salamangreat. I don't know why. Uh, I don't know why. Maybe because not. I think it's like a snowball effect where not many good players play Salamangreat. Then Salamangreat doesn't do as well as it could because there is no many good players using the deck. Then the good players don't try to play the deck because they play against some players that are not that good with the deck. Then they think and feel that the deck's not very good. So it's pretty much something like this that happened. Uh, I think the deck is really good. In my opinion, it's still the best option, especially for US for the US event, because from what I heard and see and experience in US, uh, Thunder, combo decks in general, but Thunder especially, is like very is way more popular there than in Europe or South America, for example, and also is really well represented. Like many good players use Thunder there. You can see that from Knoxville, for example. And I think many people disagree with me on that, but I think Salamangreat, especially like this, has a better matchup against is the best matchup you can have against Thunder, for example. Like it's the only way for you to win against Thunder's hand traps, and a lot of them. And going to an event where you think there are going to be a lot of Thunder, playing Thunder yourself is like suicidal. I don't understand. I don't understand why would you do that? If you are like the only Thunder in the event and the Salamangreat players are not that good, I think that's fair. But yeah, that's my opinion. So the deck. One thing that you can notice is that I don't play Cobble the Grave. I think Cobble the Grave is super average right now. Like the card is not bad, but I'm trying to stay away from cards that are like super average, and especially now that many decks and players are cutting down hand traps. Even Orcus, which was a deck that made like many lists used to have hand traps and now they don't. So it's kind of awkward. It's okay. It's a defense where they don't have the hand trap, but it's an average defense. It's not like the defense. So and there's another thing. The way this deck is built, like with Desires, for example, you usually play around hand traps by using more engine cards, like starter cards. You can count the Desires as a starter card. So it's better to go Desires the Garage and play afterwards than uh, than have like a play like Gazelle and Call, because in the instances that they don't have the hand trap, Desire is way better. And there are the instances where you don't have the Gazelle, only Desires. In that case, if Desires were called by the grave, then it's way worse. So Desires has this double utility where it can either be a negation to Ash Blossom, and also it is a starter when it is needed, when you only have Desires, for example, with like a bunch of hand traps. Also, Desires Also doubles in utility since you play so many hand traps, so you can expand a lot of cards. So getting extra cards is really useful on that. I joke with my friends that you have to have a really good reason to not play Desires, and sometimes you do, but I don't think that's the case in this deck. Like, the card is simple, like you have one card, now have two. So this is really important in this deck to have multiple options and multiple defense. Like, in the way I see this deck, you have there are pretty much two type of cards like that you want to maximize, and those are starters and defenses. Um, and defenses kind of have to be hand traps unless they are like rage, which is super searchable type of card. But since they're cards that are like not that, like Call by the Grave, Will, cards like this Cyclone, which was a card that I cut in the end, they didn't cut in the main deck, at least for now in the event that I played. So I don't like Call by the Grave a lot. Again, it's not that bad, but you have to play a 39. Oh, again, I play Upstart, so you have to play a 39 card deck. I think the biggest advantage, I think the thing that people fail to realize in Salamangreat is that his strength is not along in the actual plays, but the fact that it not fucks you over. Like, you can easily lose a match with Orcus because you draw like random shit that Orcus play, like Nightmare and all the engine requirements that Orcus needs to play to in order to like do plays, right? So Salamangreat has a lot of space and has and doesn't have a lot of those type of cards. Even the cards that they have, like I don't know, Spinny or Jaguar, if you can count them as a card like this, like the engine requirement, are not that bad as an Orcus Nightmare or a Fogblade. So the difference in quality on those cards are huge. You have way less, and the biggest strength, as I was saying, it is the fact that the deck's solid. Like, you play pretty much every game, and since you have so many hand traps, especially for side, like for side against, for example, something like Thunder, you have Lance, Ogre, and everything stays. So you have like 18 if you count Phantasmate. This is ridiculous. Like 18, this is a lot. So many times you draw doubles. Also against Thunder, not usually, but many times one hand trap is not enough. But you have two is probably enough, unless their hands like ridiculously strong, which can happen. But usually two hand traps is enough for you to not lose. And pretty much not to lose. It's similar to Sky Striker as before when I played Sky Striker. Pretty much not to lose your goal. Like, this deck has the best recursion in the meta, in my opinion. Like, you have a lot of, you play and you have a lot of the effects left in your grave, like Jaguar, Spinny, Foxy. So that's a really good thing, because pretty much any draw, any Salamangreat draw puts you in the game again. That's really good. I think this deck also is really maximizing consistency, since I play 3 Desires, Upstarter, 2 Silent Mining, and 3 Foxes. And as I said, you win games just because you play and your opponent don't. Like, you win games because the difference in consistency in your deck starts to piles up as your tournaments in plural start to progress. Like, it's really unlikely to break in this deck, especially the way it's built right now. And it seems like it doesn't do anything special, but the special thing about this is that sometimes you sit on a table and play your opponent and they break and you don't, because over time this is going to happen, and this is not a thing that you can touch. Like, it's not a thing that is hard to evaluate, it's hard to feel. That's why I think many people tend to play more powerful things. Like, Orcus and Salamangreat are really similar. They have a really good and similar turn 1 play. Like, they end on a counter, on a negation. But of course, Orcus play are stronger. But oftentimes, in my opinion, people tend to value power over consistency. And I think this is a clear case when you trade both. Like, this deck is not as powerful as Orcus, but in my opinion, it's powerful enough, and that's the key. It's powerful enough. and also there is another thing like Dweller. Like Dweller exists in this deck, and this is like a huge upside, a huge upside. And yeah, I think being powerful enough, and that's the key word, it is really important here, and I really like that. It is hard to, and I don't like people. It is hard to see. I think it was hard for me too, to understand that sometimes you don't need to be as powerful as you can. Like there is a trade-off. Like every time you deck gets more powerful, usually you are trading something for that. Like nothing's free, and usually it's consistency in that case. And this is a thing that I value way higher than many other players, I guess. So yeah. So Desires Upstart, that's why I play those type of cards. I don't see many people not even touch Upstart in this deck, which I think is crazy. What else? Uh, okay, I think I have to say about this, like 2 Jaguar and 2 Rages. Like, this is pretty much because of Desires, like, this is a concession, but it is funny since the concession in this deck is like, it's playing an extra Jaguar or playing an extra Rage, which are not bad cards at all. Like, you're not going to lose because you draw a Jaguar, but you can easily lose because you draw an Orcus Nightmare. I make the comparison here just to show you guys like the engine requirements in this deck is way better if you because you can't just count. Okay, this deck has like I don't know 7 engine requirements and Orcus has 10. The difference is not that big, but you have to see the quality in them. Like if you don't look at the quality of those, it is different, right? So, I mean, if I didn't play Desires, I wouldn't play an extra Rage or an extra Jaguar. But since I do, it is fine. Also, Jaguar really helped. The second one really helped against Sky Striker because of Cannon, and sometimes because of Call of the Grave too. So many times you see that happen. Open Jaguar is not a bad because it is easier to get into Dweller if you start your combo with like Jaguar Gazelle. So you pretty much have Dweller unless they have a negation, which they usually do. Like you pretty much can count on negations. But yeah, it's pretty good. I think it's really nice. The second Rage one of the last card that I put in the deck, and I think they're okay. Like I think it might be one of the worst the second Rage, of course, cards in the deck. But the reasoning of playing the second Rage is like you can lose a match if you desires and don't have the Rage, like the way to find the Rage, because many times you have to desires first, which again another thing that many people try to do. I hate this feeling where you have like a play like Gazelle. Let's say you open Gazelle Desires. Many players go Gazelle normal summon, and I would never do that. Like I go fuck this Desires because you have to test for Dash. If you get Nash on this like normal summon Gazelle, you pretty much fucking lose the game unless you desire afterwards and drew exactly a spin or circle on mining. You pretty much has to have it. And is a worse combo. So it's better to get Desires, Ash on Desires, and try to play afterwards with Gazelle. If they don't, and it is hard to get fucked by Desires because you have 2 Jaguars and 2 Rages, which are the main. You can banish the field spell. That's true, but yeah. What else? Jaguar, Rage, yeah, Spinny. I think Paulo is also really important because it is the only card, not the only, but the only good card that the circle and the mining can search that do something, the special summon itself on your hand. And then sometimes all you need is like an extra monster. It is especially against, for example, against Seal. Sometimes you go like normal summon special foul, and that extra monster makes you play. For example, there are like other instances like this where many of your effects in Grave, like Falco and Jaguar and Spinny, depend on the monster on the board, and have a way to ensure you have a monster on the board is really good. Like the difference between having this one extra monster on the board or not is like sometimes 2-3 summons because of Spinny and Jaguar, for example. So yeah, This is really important. About rage, I was saying, I forgot. So you can easily lose a game because you don't have a rage, especially against the trap decks, which I know is not that popular, but is a concession. Also is a concession to mining and Mystic Mine, which, as you can see, I don't have many outs too. Like it's pretty much rage, and I think it's fine. Like this is a meta call. This is really meta call dependent. If you think they're going to play a lot against a lot of mine decks, which are usually not the case in WCQs, then go ahead, main Cyclones, for example, which I think is better to main than Twin Twister, by the way. But if you don't, you think you're going to play pretty much meta, I think it's better to go like this and ignore mining game 1, and I think it's okay. So again, Cyclone is not a bad card, but it is super average. I'm trying to stay away from cards like this. So, okay, hand traps. I think Veil and Permanent Sash in Phantasm is like pretty much standard right now, and for a reason, like they are really fucking good, especially the way this deck is built to play, right? So it is really, really good. Ogre was the last card that I put in deck. It was a Cyclone before, and I think it was a good decision. Cyclone, especially since I realized, not me alone, like me and the guys from Remain, especially Christian, we talk about it, and Cyclone was being like super okay-ish, and I don't know if in Yu-Gi-Oh 2019 you can afford to have an okay-ish card. And Ogre, sometimes it is ridiculous, like you stop the return, even against Salamangreat or Orcus, depending where you use it, but sometimes it doesn't do anything. But this is when you look at the Ogre alone. Since this deck has so many hand traps, that Ogre pairs up with an Ash or a Veiler, then is way better. Also, is a card that you can draw from Phantasm, which I really like. And in US, this is like a US thing. I think Ogre is like ridiculously good because of Thunder. And of course, Thunder is not going to be like the most used deck in US. I'm sure of it. Never is. But it's really well represented. So if you have the intention to win the event, it is really likely that you have to win at some point at some points. For example, in Atlanta, I didn't play a Thunder until top 8, where I played top 8, top 4 in the finals. So this happens often because the good players usually play the deck. And they go like all together. I don't know what happened there, but it's pretty much what happened. You have to win against the deck if you have the intention to win the event, because you're eventually going to play versus them. It's like really likely. So yeah, Ogre is not insane, like you cite out that a lot, but since it has the potential to win you in the game, I think it's better than the other alternatives, which were Cyclone. I don't think there's any other type of card that I would like to play over it, and has this potential, which I really like. So yeah, Ogre. What else? Okay, that's the main deck. Inside deck, my control, I think is good. Like it could be a DD Crow, because this spot needs to be a spot for the mirror match, but my control has the upside that you can put it versus Pendulum and Thunder going second because of Seal. And this is a really good upside. Like have a card that insta forces Seal at least, right? Because what happens sometimes against Thunder and Pendulum is that when you one hand trap them, they can sometimes end on Seal 2. Not 2, but at least on Seal. And that card is fucking annoying. And my control happens on that like forces right away. And that's good. Especially now that they don't play like a good special summon dragon from Seal, like the thing that don't let you special for an extra. They don't play that anymore usually. So the mind control, you just force the Seal, and that's really good. And if they don't have Seal, like it forces something like a hot head, a negation, whatever, anything. So this is good. In the mirror, I also like mind control. It's a little weak if many people start to side Sanctum and side. I can give you that. Like if you think that many people are siding those cards, maybe you can cut mind control. I didn't thought it was the case in my event. That's why I kept it, and the Seal aspect of mind control. But it gets a little weaker. But if you don't imagine that you're going to get sight a lot, uh, even if you do, like, I don't know, maybe the seal aspect is more valuable than the sanctum aspect. I don't know. We have to think. You have to think about it. But it's better in the mirror match to have one hand trap and one mind control. That's the reasoning. It's better to have one hand trap like an Ash and one mind control than like Ash Crow, because usually the first hand trap in the mirror is the hand trap that avoids Dweller, and that's pretty much you have to count for a hand trap in the mirror. Like, it's really unlikely that you can use one hand trap and stop the return, like they don't do anything, like they don't do Wolf, Stalio, whatever. It's really unlikely, and that's one of the upsides of this deck, right? So the first hand trap doesn't stop the play, but stop the Dweller, usually. But the second hand trap, of course, they don't have the Dweller because you use the first, usually stop like a Gazelle in hand, because you negate like a Jaguar. So the Wolf can't get the Gazelle back, or you negate... pretty much you negate a Gazelle in the opponent's hand, but if they start with Cycle, they can Wolf and get the Cycle. So you're stopping a follow-up play, which is pretty much impossible to stop, because especially if they open with Circle, they have two follow-ups, like the Gazelle and the Circle. So if the second hand trap usually avoids one of those, which is like pretty much pointless. But you kind of need one hand trap to spot the Dweller, but the second hand trap doesn't stop what you need to stop. You guys know what I meant. Like, in that case, where you use one hand trap and there is no Dweller anymore, the mind control is ridiculous because they end on Stalio and the mind control is starting pretty much win the game. Or you can, if they don't have Stalio, sometimes they don't, you even use the mind control on Wolf is really good, because you can first you use the mind control on Wolf, you turn off the roar, and if they have a rage, like a pretty awkward rage, right? And you can bring the Wolf on the under the extra monster zone, and then you can like summon something over Wolf and get like this spell back, for fire monster back, for example. There's another thing that you can do. You can also like instant relink the Wolf if you already have the field spell into another Wolf. So there's a lot of possibilities, and many times when you use first hand trap, they end on like either Wolf or Stalio, and both are really good mind control targets. So I really like this card, can break games. Of course, again, if they have Sanctum, you're fucked. But maybe it's a risk that you gotta take. Sanctum has their problems, like you have to play Sight, you can't play Desires, so there are some problems in the card. So you have to evaluate what you prefer. If you think many people are playing Sanctum, Crow is better, but then you make your Thunder, and not Pendulum so much because Pendulum, right? But it's not super popular, but Thunder is at least. So you make those matchups a little worse. And I don't know if I would like to do that, but yeah. In the, what else? 20 weeks I think is pretty much mandatory. You have some way to destroy mine, at least per side, and you can play against any trap deck like True Draco, Subterror, Outer Guys, even Sky Striker. So I think those are important. I wanted to play more because I don't feel like I don't feel super safe with only 5 and the 2 rages. But I think probably enough. Like, it's probably enough because those decks are not that popular, especially if you go super deep in the tournament. So I think you can risk. In for me, especially since I had 2 buys in almost all events because of UDS win. It is way less likely for me to play against those decks because I start the tournament playing against the 2-0 guy, and that really helps me on those deck building decisions, since I don't play against a lot of those decks because they usually don't go super deep in the tournament. So I think this is a thing for me. I don't know if you guys can adapt on that or do the same thing or whatever, but I'm just saying that for me it is like it is a easier decision to do. So the third Ogre, I think Ogre is like ridiculous against Thunder. I think it's really good, and also against Sky Strike. Like Ogre is pretty much FTK against Sky Strike. Like if they can't resolve multi-roll, they insta lose. So really good there. Against Draco is also good. Lancia is a card that I have my doubts on. Like, I almost cut Lancia. Lancia is not as good as it was anymore against Thunder because the Crusader cards, which I'm getting to in a minute. But yeah, you can easily lose to, especially with this deck. If they open the Crusader Dragon package and don't open with the like banish from grave type of cards, and this lens is like useless, and you still get like at least Steel Hot Head, and that's usually enough to win against Salamangreat. So I kept Lancia because of Orcus. Like, I sided in against Thunder, but I kept because of Orcus. If there was no Orcus, I would not side Lancia. I side because it's better to have any type of interruption against Thunder going second than any other type of card. Like, it's better to, I don't know, have a Lancia going second than a fucking Foxy, for example. So that's why I kept Lancia and I sided in, but it's not the best card ever. Especially against this Crusader version. This Crusader version, Lancia and will say right away, Dueler are not that good. You can easily lose to using Dueler going first or Lancia going second. Because they do enough to stop you, since the stop play, like the seal, is really strong against Salamangreat. But it's still sided in. Against Orcus, of course, is good. But yeah, so that's why I kept. And the last card was Shadow Ride. I think I need a card that I could put going first in the mirror. And could be a lot of things, right? But Shadow Ride is really good because one is not a card that they can destroy with like something like Twist, Cyclone, or whatever. I mean, they can, but you're going to change. And it pretty much ensures it's really unlikely to lose to Sky Striker. Like, I think Sky Striker is not that good anymore. That's coming from me, which I like a lot the deck. But you sometimes can lose, and especially if they open like strong. And I really want to put them to go first. And Shadow Ride makes me more safe to do that, because usually the turn one play, unless they open like the nuts, like with engaged drawing, which is not very common, at least for now, it is like ends on 2 engages in hand. And when they end on 2 engages in hand, you set Shadow Ride like they cry. And it is really strong. Mind Crush, it is another option that I almost played, but I think Shadow Ride is stronger, especially in the mirror. Like, I think Shadow Ride is also really good in the mirror, in the Salamangreat mirror going first. And I wanted that card to put first because I want to side out the ogres. So Shadow Ride was really good on that, especially now that like you have the circle, the mining, the foxy, and you have the Balix that search this, and the both wolf effect get cards from grave. So Shadow Ride draw at least 3 cards if they went deep. If they don't do anything, they could lose. Shadow Ride also punish hand traps. Like, if you try to play the hand trap, you set shard, and they try to play like Balix, like circle shard. It's like, unless they kill you, which is really unlikely, especially now that many people cut Fusion Fire. So it's almost safe to assume they're not going to die. And even if they go like all in and try to kill you, you can eventually maybe draw into Valor or Nash. Even Phantasme can protect you, or Phantasme into those. You can also have Circle set to not die, to Fusion Fire. Like, there is a lot of ways to not die. So I think it is really likely that you win if you Shadow Ride early in the mirror. And especially against a hand trap, like the hand trap you and the Noof, and they go like circle you, Shadow Ride. They have like five cards because they used a hand trap before. So I really like the card, and it makes Sky Strike so much easier. And yeah, and it doubles as a card that I put going first in the mirror, since I can't play. I think, in my opinion, it's not wise to play Sanctum and Desires together. So, and I value Desire like super highly. I decide to have a card that can do both, and Shadow Ride is that card. Extra deck, I think this is pretty much standard, not style. Like, in this, the way this deck's played, like, you really need a second style. Like, you do that all the time. It's really important. I don't know what else to say. You just do the second style like infinite amount of times. And yep, I really like this style. The bounce effect is really good. You can do the bounce effect on your own cars if people are not aware of this. Like this happens, and this is not as unusual as it seems. So that is also that. And you get the extra effects from your grave and bounce your opponent's cards. So I really like Stalio. I hit Phoenix. I think those are standard. Dueller, of course. And I put this. Many people are using the second Dueller. I prefer Baguska. I have this in my testings. I found out that Baguska is better than this against this new Crusader Thunder than Dueller. Way better. Like if you really think about it, Dueller only stops what? Stop random dangers because it has to be random. Like they use a danger, you have to hit the danger for Dueller to stop the fucking danger. So there's that. You stop Eclipse Weaver. Half of a baby dragon, only one half of a baby dragon. And Diablos that went to grave. That fucking dragon, the mini fireball thing that went to grave, so they can special. There is not a lot that you can stop with Dueller. And also, and there is like the Thunder Dragon effects, but they pretty much only use the effects when they banish them from the grave. So there's that. So there's not much. And also, in the same time that's happening, they're using cards that are really strong against Dueller, like the Crusader cards. Like they're absolutely absurd against Dueller. Really, really good. And Baguska is really good against those, in my opinion. Like, one, you negate the fucking Reclusive. Like, you have the Dueller, they can Recluse a pop. And that Recluse a pop really hurts because sometimes you have like Impermanent set or Rage, especially Rage, or Roar set, and they go like Recluse effect and kill your fucking trap. Fuck the shit. So Baguska avoids that. Also, another thing that Baguska is really good against, it is the Draco effect. So if they get the Draco, the Crusader Draco, they can't get the thing from the grave again. Usually it's Reclusia, so that's also a thing because you are denying them one monster. Also negates Solar, which sometimes people still play, which it is nice to have this option. Of course, negates Levianeer, which is ridiculous good. So, but pretty much the main reason is how Dweller is weak to Crusader, and Dweller is way better against Crusader. Yeah, it's pretty much that. I think also negates the Omni Dragon, the Firewall, the on-field effect, right? Which is a big plus in my opinion. Yeah, I think it's better. Like well protected Baguska, like a Baguska plus something. I mean, Baguska alone is not going to cut. Like they're going to, I don't know, Unicorn, attack over, whatever. But Baguska plus something is better than Dweller plus something because you usually have your entire play because they usually don't play hand traps, right? So if you know stun, especially if you know when they for sure don't have hand traps, then Baguska is good. Also, Baguska is also good against Phantasmate that sometimes Thunder plays, even the main deck. So yeah, because sometimes you have Veil or Impermanence, and if you make Dweller, they still have the Phantasmate negation, but if you have Baguska, they don't, which is another plus. I mean, I'm not 100% set on stone on that opinion, but it's like 95. I think Baguska is better. I would like to test more, but I think it's better. So yeah, another thing it is that I like Borreload. Like Borreload is the last card in the deck. Borreload is like a problem solver. If there's something ridiculous going on in the opponent's side of the board, Borreload usually solve it. So it's not common to happen. Like you don't do the Borreload a lot, but sometimes it's like the only card that can solve something. Sorry. So. And also it's an out to the opponent's Borreload. Of course, Rage can also usually solve everything that they have, like the second effect of Rage, since it doesn't target, so usually can destroy anything. But having Borreload is useful. And also in the mirror match, it's not common, but can happen. You can Borreload the opponent's Dweller, depending on your hand. All you need is like you need to have access to Gazelle and Fall and if Salamangreat. if you had those, you can make overload and get the duel. Of course, they can use any interruption, which is fair, right? But sometimes they make like they open like a hand with a lot of Salamangreat cards. They don't have defenses, and sometimes this can happen. So not happen as often as before when I use will, but it happens enough to just say it. So yeah, I think that's it. I think this deck is really good. I wouldn't change my deck choice for sure. Like I really like this deck. I underestimated this deck at first. I thought that Salamangreat was worse than it was, and I thought it was simpler than it was. Like that's not the case at all. This deck can get really complicated when you're playing. Okay, of course you know how to play the fucking Duella trap set fast, and sometimes you win the game before you have to make like decisions. But sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to make decisions you need your brain. And when you have to do that, it's not as easy as it seems. When you have like the option, like the turn free play is way more complicated. Especially in this deck, since you don't play Fusion Fire, so you don't have like the free win. Uh, you don't have like this free win condition, which I think is fair to have, but I don't like very much randomly drawing Fusion Fire. And usually win if you know how to grind with this deck. You usually win anyway, and that's the reason I don't play Fusion Fire. But you have to grind. What I mean by grind is like they use the card in the proper order and end on like wolf traps, hand traps, pass. So you don't kill them, but you don't lose, right? And then you eventually win. So yeah, I think this deck is way more difficult than it seems, and yeah, I really like it, and I wish I had more events to play this. I played 3 events with this. I went well on all 3. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy it. Until next time, and see you guys later.